Thanks for coming back. The next section we're going to be working on is the bottom center candy. And what I'm going to do is on page 26, I'm going to look at the diagram right here. I'm also going to compare it to the bottom candy on the finished project, and it is in the correct position. So those sections are HH, GG, JJ, LL, and KK. On page 33 is the finished project that I referred to, and it says final assembly. So I know that is correct. Now I'm going to compare on page 11 from the pattern booklet, which is our master copy. So for color placement, when you compare these two, you can see how I know it's in the correct position is because it's reversed. So now if I turn this over, I place this and I determined that HH1 is the orange. Then I went from the sections going across and I determined that GG1 is going to be orange. 2 is purple, 3 is orange, 4 is purple, 5 is orange, 6 is purple, 7 is orange, 8 is purple, 9 is orange, and 10 is purple. Everything else is going to be cut from white fabric. Now, in the other videos, I've showed you how to cut out the pattern pieces. I did manage to get my cutting pieces printed on freezer paper using my inkjet printer, and I will put a picture of how I laid them out for cutting. Now, because I ran out of freezer paper, I have painstakingly, instead of making an extra copy from freezer paper, I used my scrap pieces of freezer paper, and I just used my light box to trace out my pattern from the diagram on page 11. And I just colored in the sections with a ordinary pencil crayon. These are my stitching patterns. And when I am folding along my lines, I'm going to fold starting from the highest number. When I'm stitching, I will stitch 1 to the highest number. When I'm cutting and folding along my lines, I start from the highest number. So again, I'm going to place that right along there, along the number 7. Folding that back. And I fold all my pattern pieces before I start stitching. So I'm just going to go ahead and fold along the stitching lines, and starting with the highest number, working to the lowest number. So section JJ is all folded on the stitching lines. So off camera, I am going to go ahead and fold along all stitching lines, and I'll be back. Let's start the stitching. I'm going to take my JJ1. Remember, I want it wrong side to the sticky side of the freezer paper. Now I'm going to fold on the line between JJ1 and JJ2. Okay, here I've made a mistake. I have done something wrong, so I need to go back. I've stitched along that line. You can see where I should have stitched along this line and not the other line. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to pick out my stitches and reposition that and do it the right way. So I'll be back in just a moment. So I'm going to show you how I pick out my stitches, and what I do is I start at the very end, and those are tiny stitches. So I'm just going to start at this end, and I'm just going to pick out my stitches, just pulling back on that top piece. And when I see the little loop, I'll just pick it out. I'm going to zoom right in here for you so you can see if I just tug on that, I can see the little loop. And then I just loosen it. I'm just picking out the last few stitches. And then I'm going to figure out where I went wrong. Okay. So now I'm going to just run my finger along there, and I can feel my seam right there. These are just my threads from where I stitched before. So now I am going to figure out, I've stitched along that line, so now I should be stitching along between 5 and 6 where I had stitched along this one. So I need to stitch back on there, fold it back along the 6, get rid of a few threads here that I didn't trim properly before. Okay. And now, and I'm going to double check, that one's stitched. That's where I need to be folding. And now I'll go back and trim this off. So I have my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And now I'm going to double check and see where my number 6 is supposed to be. And it's supposed to go this way. So that's the way it's supposed to go. Okay, now I'm back in business, I think. So I can put this one back. Place that into position. Turn it over, and again make sure that I'm going to be stitching along that fold. And I'll take that to the sewing machine now, and hopefully I will have solved my little boo-boo. Okay, let's keep this right here in case I need it again. Okay, so now that looks like it's in the right position, so now I'm going to fold it back. And there I have my seam, and there I have my seam. So that's right now. So I'll continue on. That looks much better. Okay, I'm just going to zoom you back out a bit. Okay. Now I can take that to the iron. Okay, so now our next piece is number 7. So here is where I folded along between 6 and 7. Make making sure I'm doing that right. Pardon me. Trim that off. Now put my number 7 into position. And just double check. Oh, that's right. Now I'm doubting myself. Okay, now I'll stitch along that line. Okay, so I've stitched along there. Remove my pattern piece, and that is our last piece for this section. I'm giving the whole piece just a final pressing, and now I'm going to trim the outside edges. Remember, we're trimming away on that outside line. And now I'll trim the other two sides. So our JJ section is complete. So I'll set that off to the side, and now we'll go on to the HH. I'm now going to be adding on the white sections around the outside of my candy. So I'll stitch along that line all the way across. Okay, I've stitched along the line between G1 and G11. Okay, I've stitched along the line between 11 and 12. Next is G13, right along here, which is between 13, 6, and 7. G13, Okay, I'm sitting here looking at this, and for some reason, I don't know why, but I think I've made a mistake someplace, or something doesn't look right here. What did I do wrong? Well, I'm not sure, but we'll just have to check it out. But I'm going to go ahead and stitch this together. I'll remove my papers. Line up my cut edges and stitch along with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I've stitched that on and it does look okay. It was just me doubting myself. Next piece on. I've got my 2 side pieces stitched on, and now we're going to do that pressing. Make sure my iron is turned on here. And now I'm going to brush those seams. Give them a nice brush with my water brush. Just going to use my fingers to open up those seams. There's a lot of bulk in these, so the only way to do this is by pressing them open and using the precision piecing. I'll give it a little bit of a press with my seam roller. Check it from the right side. That looks pretty good to me. Give this a finger press. Find where that seam opens up. I'll run my water brush along there. Flatten those seams out. Give them a press with my fingers. I need a little more water right there. Just going to make sure I'm giving this a good press with my fingers before I take it to the iron. There's a lot of bulk right in this section here. If I press from the right side with my seam roller. Now press it with the iron. Actually, that looks pretty good. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my clapper that I have off to the side here. I'm going to press this put my clapper down on there. Leave that there for a couple of seconds. Press this one. And then put my clapper down on there and let that sit for a minute or two. Give my iron a clean off just in case. And that feels pretty darn flat to me. I think I'll just add a little bit more of the precision piecing fabric treatment here on that heavy spot. And just see if that makes a difference. And we'll just give it another little press with my iron and put the clapper back on there. And while that's sitting there, I'll get my fabric pieces for the K and the L. And looking at the pattern there. So now I'm going to trim these right along the line, the outside line, which is the dotted line. Oh yes, that feels so much better. I can't believe what that precision piecing does there. It's just amazing. The clapper helps too. Set this little piece off to the side. I can use that for another little tiny white piece. Okay, my pieces are now ready, so we're going to put them on to our piece. And now I'm going to look and see that my candy is facing in the proper direction. And I don't think it really matters which one goes on where, but remember that I cut it with the wrong side up. So when I take my paper off, it's all ready to be placed on. I'll take my other piece. I've stitched that down and I'm just placing my pattern pieces back on my master page here. I'm just going to take this now to the steam iron. So now I've just given that a press just to set my seams, and I'm going to take my water brush and just go along there and press my seams toward the cut edge. Give them a nice finger press. making sure they're all laying nice and flat. In the bulky areas, which there is a bit of bulk here and here, I can just give that another hit with my water brush. And now I'll press it, and I'm going to press from the right side first. Give this another little dab. Give this a finger press. Press from the right side first. And believe it or not, the candy turned out right. I was doubting it, but it does look right now. I'm going to be going on to the next candies, and I'll have a few more little tips and tricks for you. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you come back to watch the next section. And if you could leave a comment in the comment section below the video, tell me where you're watching from, and tell me if you are working on this project from Yvette Renee, and I'll be back in the next video. Bye-bye.